Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nerds Only podcast. You are here with your hairiest host, Mother Goose, and sadly, Cosmar could not join us today, but my good friend, Setherton, is here again. How you doing, buddy?
Honor is not dead as long as he lives in the hearts of men.
Dude, that is my favorite Stormlight quote. I don't know if I've told you yet. I have it tattooed on my chest.
You do?
Yeah.
Sick. My wife is going to get the You Will Be Warm Again from the same book as a tattoo.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, today we are continuing our Wind and Truth Spoilercast, just like last week. If you have not finished Wind and Truth, please stop listening. We are talking all spoilers, and as connected as it is to the rest of the Cosmere, we'll be talking just probably a lot of Cosmere spoilers in general. As a quick little refresher from last week for part 1, we did talk about the 10-day structure, the prologue, and then we talked about Kaladin, Szeth, and Adolin's stories, or their arcs over the book. Today, I was thinking we start with Shallan, Renarin, and Rlain's story.
That works for me.
Dope. I know there's, they each kind of have their separate moments, but they're together through a lot of the book. I thought it would be a good starting place.
Yeah, they're each their own viewpoint character, but a lot of their plot threads kind of weave in and out of each other's.
Yeah. I love Renarin and Rlain. I really love their romance in this novel. However, I cannot tell who is who. Like, I'm not sure who's Renarin, and I'm not sure who Rlain is.
Like, in retrospect, or just as you're reading?
In retrospect, as I'm reading, I'm like, okay, this is Renarin, this is Rlain, but, like, genuinely, right now, in this moment, I'm not sure which was the colon and which was the singer.
The singer was the one with the shell.
Well, yes, thank you. But I think that's my only real complaint I have about their romance is them both being, like, our starting names. It really confused me a little bit as a reader.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get that. I'm glad that Rlain goes by Rlain instead of Shen, because that was kind of unintentionally racist for the Bridge 4 to name their only Parshendi member Shen.
Right.
So
I didn't even
like
think about that. Yeah.
I'm glad that like he's going by like his actual name. Rlain is one of my favorite characters in Stormlight because of his like the position that he's put in, where he saw the sort of corruption that was going on with Odium and the listeners before, like, because he was separated. He was witnessing one of the only honorable Alethi do his thing in Kaladin with Bridge 4.
Right.
Like, he was accidentally put in a perfect position to see this is a lot more complex than we originally thought. And then he returns to his family and sees that they're all under this spell, so to speak, of believing that this is the only thing the only option that the listeners have left.
Yeah. Yeah.
Technically betrays his whole family in order to stop the destruction of the world. It doesn't work, and then he's left a traitor to his people and has to live with the humans, and the humans are they don't like him because he's from the same species as everybody that they're fighting. And I thought that was just such a fantastic like setup for a character to have him be put in that position, and I think it's handled really well throughout the books of like he understands deep down, like, yeah, these people care about me, but there's still like this doubt that he has about there's certain times when like he notices they're not including him in conversation. There's certain times where he these people are his friends, but he sees them flinch when he walks into the room. And it's like, like, I know it's not like they don't actually feel that way about me, but that it's impossible to ignore those little kind of micro expressions that happen in that.
Yeah. And then what I think makes his story even more heartbreaking is we do get a flashback to when he was chosen to be a spy, and that moment when he says, "I'll do it," and none of his Parshindi family disagrees. No one says, "Wait, we want you to stay here." And that just hurts so much, especially having the context of what you were talking about, is how much he struggled in the human world. And he is a man who feels like he doesn't truly belong on either side. And I think Brandon did some really interesting character work with him in this novel.
Definitely. And then having his partner in crime be Renarin is so great, because Renarin has always felt the exact same way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's royalty. He's a prince. He's a shard bearer. He's a knight. Like as the story progresses, he goes from being a prince to a shard bearer to a knight radiant. And he still like doesn't feel like everyone truly accepts him the same way that everybody else seems to be accepted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, that kind of does like feed into, you know, Sanderson's handling of characters who are on the autism spectrum. Because Renarin definitely does exhibit a lot of the traits that
for sure
would be diagnosed as autism, but like that, I think it's something that is also relatable to a lot of people who aren't on the spectrum, who, you know, just that feel that doubt of like, yeah, I'm technically by all accounts part of this group, but also I can't deny that I'm treated differently.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate everything that's going on with Rlain and Renarin. I think that along with like Adolin and whatever was going on in Shinovar, their stories were ranked in my favorite arcs of this book.
I'm glad you brought up Renarin's autism, because I feel like this is something that Brandon handles really well.
Yeah.
And he's gotten better at handling as the Cosmere has progressed.
Right.
He's definitely one of my favorite autistic characters. However, we didn't talk about this last time. Zeth totally has autism, and I didn't realize till this book. I hate to say it, but I think Zeth has taken my favorite autistic character role from Renarin.
Okay. Yeah, his whole thing of like I did everything right, like but still you don't like that I did everything right, or I must have messed it up somewhere. It must be me that did something wrong. Like that's something that is very present mentality that you find in a lot of people who have autism disorder of you're trying to do everything right. You memorize all the rules. You try to align yourself as perfectly with the ideal as possible, and then find that people still have a problem with you.
Yeah.
That's something that I think is very astute of Brandon to have observed and included in his writing.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just, I've been saying this for years, that diversity makes stories better, but the representation has to be done correctly. And like, as somebody with autism, and I mean, most of the main hosts for Nerds Only, we all have autism. It just means a lot to us to have, like, to see ourselves represented, and also we're a hero, and also we get to have cool powers too, you know?
Yeah, I'll say I don't have a diagnosis, but there are a lot of things in my life that have made me want to seek one out.
Yeah.
Just my experiences and the way that my thought patterns seem to be different from people that I interact with, that it's kind of like, you know, this would be worth talking to a psychiatrist about.
There's validation to it. Once you find out, it's just like, okay, I haven't been crazy my whole life. There's a reason.
Right. Yeah. I didn't do anything to put me here. Yeah.
But anyway, definitely. Sorry, back.
I think Brandon has gotten so good at portraying that as actually being a spectrum rather than just like a switch on and off. To branch out from Stormlight just a little bit, like Steris Harms or Steris Ladrian now from Mistborn Era 2 is very clearly seen, like portrayed as being somewhere on the spectrum. But she is a badass. Like she is, you know, she is, it's to her benefit, this difference that she has compared to the general population, where she's got a gun strapped to her leg because who knows, he might need it, you know. And it manifests in ways of her over preparing, and then it always pays off.
Yeah,
for her. And then the other one would be Yumi and the Nightmare Painter.
Nice.
Have you read Yumi?
I have not.
Okay.
But I mean, minor spoilers I'm okay with.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not going to spoil anything about the plot or characters. This is just something about Yumi specifically. She feels like she can't experience a lot of the good things life has to offer in an organic way. She feels like she's constructing them to happen to her rather than letting them happen naturally. And she feels like that, like, the experience is lessened because, like, but this isn't the way it's supposed to happen. I made it happen this way.
Yeah.
And that was something that I found super relatable about her character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't read the book, but as you were talking, I was like, she's just like me for real.
Yeah. So sorry for the tangent to his other works. I just want to give Sanderson kudos in the way that he's portraying it as a spectrum, like it is, rather than it just being a binary. You either have it or you don't, and everybody who has it is the same way.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Renarin and Rlain, they're also both Truth Watchers, right?
Yes, I believe they're both the alternate type of Truth Watcher after was it the Midnight Mother? Or
it starts Ja'anat?
Ja'anat?
Yeah.
Ja'anat has liberated them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Which that's a whole podcast episode right there, what Ja'anat's doing, because there seems to be a wide range of what people consider that to be.
Yeah.
Some people think it's corruption. Some people think it's liberation. We find out, I think, in this book that she only does it to willing Spren.
Yes, that was a big revelation.
That was a
big
revelation. Yeah. That she doesn't do it without consent.
Yeah.
And seeing like there's a lot going on politically, even more than what we saw before with like the Spren and how they're interacting with the shards and whether or not they want to be beholden to the shards that they are.
Right. Spren have always been amazing, but his work in Rhythm of War and this novel really fleshed them out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so Renarin and Rlain are both this like augmented Truth Watcher.
Right.
Which gives them some abilities that Truth Watchers typically didn't have. I don't think Truth Watchers were able to see the future. I don't think they had access to fortune.
Yeah.
Before this corruption, because all of the Radiants were warned against seeing the future.
Right.
So this corruption, I think, because Odium has access to fortune beyond what Honor had, that this sort of corruption / liberation has augmented the surges.
Yeah.
To kind of give more of Odium's investiture to the Knights Radiant.
Right.
Which is exciting because Odium doesn't exist anymore. So these Spren that have been liberated by Ja'anat might have some of the last remnants of what was Odium's power before this book happened.
That's a great point, because these Spren, I think, are a great look at retribution, right? Because they are a mixing of Odium and Honor's power.
You're so right.
Right?
Like Renarin and Rlain are kind of like these paradigms of what Honor and Odium could be.
Yeah, what their like Knights Radiance could look like.
Yeah.
Just
that's
hypothetically.
Awesome. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have put it together if you weren't, if it hadn't been for what you were saying. This is why we have co-hosts, everybody.
Right. Yeah. There was one part that, like, there were a couple parts in this book where as I was reading, my initial knee-jerk reaction was, oh, okay, come on.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I see. But then, like, in retrospect, it kind of means more and related it to other life experience. Or it's like, no, that's actually pretty, like, realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them was when in one of the visions of while they were in the spiritual realm, they had one of their Truth Watcher visions, and they went through it together instead of alone, right? And they saw a pane of Renarin and Rlain kissing.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely nothing against that, but like personally I was like, okay, this is a little cheesy.
Yeah.
That's like this, that's a book talk type trope of
Yeah.
But then thinking about it, it's like, if that happened in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I was seeing, like there's these characters who are these player characters who are on this like will they won't they journey type of thing, and then the DM had that be a vision that they saw, the whole table would have erupted, so it's like at the time I was like, okay, it's a little cheesy, it's a little on the nose, but then I'm thinking like, if I was actually playing a character in that circumstance, I would be howling,
Yeah.
and
it felt a little autistic to me too, just that whole like autistic people often try to plan every little detail out. We have conversations with ourselves that we think are going to happen in the future so that we can prepare for it and say the right thing. Right. And so obviously this was a magic vision. It's not autism, but it felt very autistic to me. Like he was planning out the future.
No, that makes sense.
But I agree. There were some corny moments. I really liked the conversation that Brandon Sanderson was trying to have on the whole interspecies, like, can a human and a Parshindi fall in love? What does that look like? And then through the visions, we get to see that previous Knights Radiants have fallen in love with the singers, and that's worked, and they seemed happy until everything went wrong.
Quote unquote worked.
Right,
Not through any fault of their own, but that was one of the best parts of the book for me, was seeing the actual sealing of Ba'ed Mishram.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we found out that Renarin and Rlain were going to be a thing, my initial reaction was like, okay, you're going to have to do some work to sell me on that.
Mm-hmm.
But the seeing them as being this sort of continuation of what the Knights Radiant and the Singers had gotten to before the False Desolation happened.
Right. Yeah.
Really sold me both on that and on Renarin and Rlain. It's like, no, this isn't just like a one weird thing, a human and a singer. It's a new thing in this world. It's like, no, you are the legacy of the final generation of the Radiants and the Singers before Ba'ed Mishram was sealed away. That this is a natural continuation of what was going on there.
Yeah.
And seeing that like this is the role, is like, it didn't work out last time. Honor acted entirely against his intent and ruined it for everyone in that time. And by the way, if I was a Knight Radiant at that time, I'd be looking at dropping that sword. After finding out all of that, seeing Renarin and Rlain kind of fill that same sort of niche in the story that the leader of the Radiants and the leader of the Singers did back at the beginning, was really satisfying for me.
Yeah. So while I really enjoyed their story, I do feel like it was a little more setting up for the next arc than some of the other arcs were.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like Renarin and Rlain are going to play more major roles going forward, and this was just prepping them for that instead of, like, giving them a satisfying conclusion to their arcs.
Right. And there's a lot of things in this book that I think follow along that same line of thought. Mm-hmm. It was really not as much of a finale to this arc as a lot of people were expecting.
Right. Yeah, I think, I've talked to at least a couple people that expected it to be like Mistborn Era 1, Era 2, when really it's just, there's a couple years difference. It's still the same story.
Yeah. I was expecting like the end of the Hero of Ages, and what we got was more like the end of Well of Ascension.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, something like this is the end of an era for certain, but things have not been resolved, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, I think last time I mentioned, like, this is what Empire Strikes Back was to Star Wars, where it's a lot of people right now, because we don't have the resolution, are saying, like, how could you end it this way? Like, what, like, you know, what, this is terrible. It doesn't have any actual resolution to it. It just heightens the stakes and puts everybody in a worse position going forward. And that's what a lot of people were saying about the Empire Strikes Back when it first came out. And then we got to see the whole story, and Empire Strikes Back ended up being the defining movie that made Star Wars what Star Wars is.
Right.
And I'm trusting that that's what this book is going to be.
Yeah.
Going forward.
I agree. Well, moving us to Shallan, unless there's anything else you wanted to say about Renarin and Rlain.
They're cute. I want more of them. I want to see, you know, because I'm glad that they got back to the tower and were there when the final desolation, the Night of Sorrows, actually, like, happened.
Yeah.
So that we know that they're still at the tower, and we can, you know that we're going to see more of them.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up, because I cannot remember at all. Did Renarin get to say goodbye to his father before the contest?
I don't remember. I feel like they had a moment.
Yeah.
Beforehand. Like, I can't imagine Renarin would be anywhere else before the contest.
Right. Last week we talked about Adolin not getting that, and I was sitting there and I was like, did both of them miss a chance to say goodbye?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll have to reread
I'm not sure if we got that.
it at some point.
Yeah.
Moving on to Shallan. I have mixed feelings about her arc. So, you know, I felt like her arc was weaker in The Way of Kings. I really enjoyed her arc moving forward from Words of Radiance. However, it really bothered me when she got to the Shattered Plane and she wasn't honest with them. Like, she kept secrets about the Ghost Bloods and everything.
Yeah.
But I just kept telling myself, okay, Brandon's doing this for a reason. He has a overarching arc for Shallan, and I'm going to trust him. And we actually do get to see that play out in this. I mean, obviously all the novels, but this one is the conclusion to it. I didn't feel like it was that strong of a conclusion. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that Shallan is still going to be a major player in the series going forward. And so I'm hesitant to say that something was mishandled, especially since we've seen the things that we thought were mishandled wrap up really well in this particular author's writings. So I'm hesitant to say that. I guess I would say, like, I didn't really have a problem with Shallan's story. Yeah. I actually really liked her in Way of Kings. Yeah. I thought she was a great, like, breath of fresh air after the brutality of the bridge crews and the politics of the shattered like the war camps. And Dalinar's thing. Like, I always was kind of like, oh, cool, a Shallan chapter when I was reading Way of Kings, because, like, okay, now we get to do some scholarship. Also, she was the closest of the three main plot threads of Way of Kings to figuring out what was actually going on. Yeah. Yeah. And so I was always excited to get to a Shallan chapter, because it was like, oh, we're going to find out more. Like, you know. Yeah. She's soulcast, and what's this crazy place with beads and the backwards sun? You know, she seemed to be, well, she didn't have, like, the cool action scenes, and she didn't have those, like, really heartbreaking scenes of, you know, the bridgemen dying on the battlefield and all of that, or like Kaladin surviving the high storm and all of that. Yeah. Like, she didn't have any of those, but for me it was like that she's actually the closest to the lore of what this whole story is actually about. So I actually really liked her in that one. And then seeing her kind of develop this, I actually bounced off of her dissociative identity disorder stuff when it started to manifest in Oathbringer. I guess it started to manifest way sooner, but it really became front and center in Oathbringer. A main plot thread, yeah. Yeah. And I actually did, like, kind of, what's going on here? And then, you know, rereads showed me, oh yeah, this has been where she is. This has been where she was since the beginning. Right. The investiture and her bond with Pattern has manifested these things that were in her subconscious a lot more strongly than otherwise would have been done. Right. But they were always there. And this book, I don't really have a problem with Shallan's arc in general. It did seem kind of out of nowhere that her whole thing seemed to be like, do I have to always kill my mentors?
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like that was really an idea that was present in the previous books.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, like, you're writing a new book. This book is the size of 3 other books. Maybe it's time to like introduce something new that feeds in from where she was previously.
Yeah.
For me, it was kind of like, yeah, but no. Like, you haven't. You didn't kill Adolin. He taught you how to wield a shard blade. You know, you didn't you didn't kill Yasna. She was your, you know. And so it wasn't as strong as I think her characterization has been previous books. But, like, I don't know that it detracted from my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, just to clarify, I do still, like, in all of her novels, I did really enjoy her arcs. I really love her as a character. I just feel like they've been a little weaker than the other storylines.
Sure.
I've got a question for you. As somebody who, like, I just read the Cosmere last year. I started with Stormlight. As somebody who had read a lot more of the Cosmere as a whole, how much did you know about the Ghostbloods?
I had wondered before book 4 came out.
Yeah.
I didn't have any support for it beyond just like some general logic behind it. I had thought that Kelsier might be involved.
Gotcha.
I didn't know he was leading them. I thought maybe he had founded them and then they were doing their other stuff.
Own thing. Yeah.
Ghostbloods to me sounded like, okay, so Ghostblood, could that be like our heritage is related to somebody who exists only in spirit form?
Right.
You know, and it's like, well, you know, Kelsier. Also, there's a Squadron woman who is the mentor to the guy leading this current cell of the Ghostbloods.
Right.
So clearly they have a presence on Scadrial.
Yeah.
So it was a lingering possibility in my head that Kelsier was involved. But then, you know, when they dropped the Lord of Scars line in book 4, it was like, oh, okay, so he's actually leading them. Like Kelsier's actively out there, you know, commanding these people.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I figured their biggest goal was to figure out a way to get pure investiture off of Roshar.
Right.
Because investiture pretty much everywhere else is very, like, you can't just take it and use it to power anything. Right? You can't use breaths to power allomancy. You can't burn metals to awaken objects. You know, it's very locked into what this can and can't do. Whereas Stormlight is it's just you're absorbing pure investiture and then doing things with it. And did you say you have read The Lost Metal?
Not yet.
Okay, so I won't spoil anything.
I have a couple chapters left in Bands of Mourning, and I will be starting The Lost Metal soon. However, I mean, just going to Dragonsteel, I had so much of The Lost Metal spoiled. So, I mean, I'm okay if you want to say something about it.
I won't spoil anything about the plot of The Lost Metal. I will say the Ghostbloods do make an appearance.
Gotcha.
In The Lost Metal.
Makes sense based on timeline.
Right. And they have Purified Door, DOR door from Elantris. Yeah. Which is what powers the Aeons in Elantris.
Right.
And that they are able to like use to fuel allomancy or some other things that I'm not going to get into because it implies more for big Cosmere stuff that you should read for yourself.
I appreciate it.
But like they're able to use it to power other magic systems in the Cosmere. But it's extremely rare and difficult to get because all of the investiture of the Aeon Door is in the cognitive realm instead of the spiritual realm. And so you can't really travel there without being torn to bits by it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't do the Elantrian, the Aeons specifically, maybe all the magic from Elantris. Don't you have to, like, if you're off-world, don't you have to stand on a map of Elantris?
It's not that you have to stand on a map of Elantris, I don't think. It's that Have you read Elantris?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's more that where you are doing the aeons, the base aeon of it has to match the geography of where you are.
Oh, okay.
Because if you remember the resolution of Elantris, the reason the aeons weren't working was because that earthquake happened and opened up a rift
Right.
across, and once he incorporated that line representing the rift, the aeons started working again. So I don't think there is a scene in I won't say who it is or what they're doing in the Lost Metal where one of the Ghostbloods is an Elantrian. And they ask for a map of where they are before they start doing it. I don't think you have to stand on a map of it. I think it's that I need to figure out what the lines of this the geography here are to form the base of my Aeon that I'm about to inscribe.
Gotcha. That's really cool. I knew that it was connected to maps.
Yeah.
But I just figured it was all connected to the Elantris map. So the fact that it changes based on planet is really cool.
Yeah, that's what I think it is, because the shard in question is Dominion, I believe.
Dominion and Devotion, right?
Yeah, Devotion. And I think that I could be wrong. I've read Lost Metal twice.
Gotcha.
I didn't pick up on that. I could be wrong. I think it's more just that because the base Aeon for doing Aeons in Elantris is based on the geography of the city of Elantris and Hallandren in general. Or Hallandren, not Hallandren. Hallandren is Warbreaker.
Right.
Yeah. Wherever it is in Elantris, because the base Aeon that all other Aeons are built out of is like a topographical map of the area. I think that like you can still use Dominion's investiture elsewhere, but because it's Dominion, the intent requires that you have to make your base Aeon out of the geographical formations of wherever you are.
Okay. That makes sense.
I could be wrong.
No, I mean, you know more than I do, so I trust you. So Shallan's story, what I love about it is just how Cosmere interconnected it is. Of course, Dalinar, Kaladin, Adolin, all of their stories matter to the Cosmere in general.
Yeah.
Especially with how things play out in this novel, but Shallan's in it, right? She's competing with the Ghostbloods. They've got different goals. She's learning more about the Cosmere as a whole, and that's something I really enjoy, especially as somebody who started with Stormlight.
Yeah. I thought that, Shallan seemed to be the one who, if anybody here, if any of the 3 or 4 main characters from the first book were going to be aware of what was going on elsewhere in the Cosmere, it would probably be Shallan.
Yeah.
I liked her fight with the Ghostbloods. I liked the whole, we have light weaving, so we don't, and it's the spiritual realm, so we don't know this, the Almighty himself in this vision might be Mraize in disguise.
Right. Right.
And I really liked the sort of espionage aspect of that.
I thought it was a great way to do espionage in a fantasy world.
Right. Yeah. I always love when existing mechanics are given. Like we know what the existing mechanics are, and then they interact in a really surprising way or something that you didn't think of. So the whole anti-Stormlight knife that stabbed Shallan, and it was like, it didn't immediately kill her. I was expecting like when it happened, I was like, oh no, because you expect it to immediately kill her because it's an anti-investiture thing. But if she's not actually holding any real investiture, then it's like a race of, is the anti-Stormlight gonna run out first, or am I gonna bleed out first?
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool, and it had a lot of really fun, unique tension to that fight scene. Like, I can't heal myself while this is in me, or I'll explode. I thought that was a really creative way to heighten the stakes of that fight.
Yeah. And then, not Mraize, but his mentor. What was her name?
I think Eatil?
Eatil? Nice.
Eatil? That's how I always pronounced it.
her becoming formless was so cool.
Yeah.
The whole time I was getting frustrated. I was like, no, we solved this whole formless thing last book. Why is she here?
Yeah.
And then to find out it was her, I was like, of course, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
That's what I love about Brandon Sanderson and his plot twists. In context, they're really obvious. Almost every time there's a plot twist, I look back at the novel and I was like, I probably should have figured that out.
Yeah. Yeah, like Tensoon as Orsur name dropping preservation and ruin to Vin, like towards the beginning of book 2 of Mistborn, before they ever became major players in the series. Stuff like that, where it's like, oh, it was right there the whole time.
Yeah. Iato was gone, Formless was there. It was obvious, but I didn't see it coming, and that is one of my favorite things about his writing.
Yeah. And usually if something feels off, it's not because it's being mishandled. It's because it's supposed to feel off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I really liked a lot of Shallan's whole deal in this book. I think the one thing that I didn't like, and it's something that it's a place where I agree with you in your TikTok video about it, talking about, I feel like this book should have been longer.
Yeah.
Crazily enough, was the reveal of her mom, as the handled Shanarach, or Shauna. That was something that I have theorized about. The fandom has theorized about. Reddit has theorized about since book 2 came out.
Yeah,
and it didn't seem like it was handled with the weight that it maybe should have been.
Yeah.
That like, this is an important big moment. Like, this is a reveal. Shallan caused this desolation because it wasn't Taln who broke on Braze. Taln did not break.
Yeah.
It was Shauna, and it wouldn't have happened if Shallan hadn't killed her in self-defense.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not your fault. Absolutely. Nobody would blame you in that instance, but Shallan would definitely blame herself.
Yeah.
You know, and like, it's such a huge reveal of this thing that's been there all along. And a lot of the fandom had kind of started theorizing along those lines. Yeah. And so I get, like, maybe, okay, if you guys are already on the same page, we don't need to devote a whole lot of time to it here. But I was hoping that the moment when that was revealed would have a lot more drama to it, and have just like, you know, and it's one of those things where I feel like, you know, a couple more chapters would have really
helped out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not usually one to say that Sanderson's books should have more chapters. You know, recently I do think like a lot of his books could have been improved by cutting another 10,000 words. You know, that it's just a reality that, like, when you're Brandon Sanderson, editors don't push back as hard as they used to. You know, his previous editor, Moshe Fader, retired right before Rhythm of War came out. And I think you can see, starting with Rhythm of War, there's a lot of things where I personally feel, you know, I think the editor should have been a little more aggressive with this. In tightening up the story, and you can have these 3 events all happen in the same scene. You don't need to have a separate chapter for each one. You know, and so my current stance on a lot of his prose right now is, you know, let's get your editor to slap you around a little bit, and you know, because I know you can take it, Sanderson.
Tighten it up.
I know you can take it. You're extremely good at receiving criticism, but your new editor has not been in the industry as long as you. Your previous editor was in the industry for 30 years before you were. And so your previous editor was able to be like, no, that's not how this works. We're going to do this. And I think that a lot of his books were made better because of that frankness of, you can't do that. You know? And his new editor is now less experienced than Brandon is. And so I feel like she might be a little
weird position.
Less, you know, obviously she's still an editor. She's still going to edit the books. But I feel like there's less of a authority there that she might have, or she might feel like she has to actually, like, say, these 3 chapters could have all been one chapter.
Yeah.
So normally I'm not like, yeah, let's add more to these books. Normally I'm like, every single one of those node fights in Rhythm of War could have been a single a single scene.
Right.
When it comes to like things with Shallan and her mother, I was like, let's get 5 chapters of that. Let's get Shallan actually figuring it out. Like, let's not just have her be like, oh yeah, I guess she is my mom. Hi, Mom.
Yeah.
Let's actually like have her like struggle over that and come to terms with it.
And so I've got 2 notes. It was revealed at the Dragonsteel Nexus ball. That fan theory was confirmed at the ball.
Oh.
Chanarach actually appeared and was part of the production.
Wow.
And like Wit has to like drag her off as she's trying to get to Shallan, so that she doesn't ruin Shallan's wedding. And that moment was amazing. However, it did spoil the book.
Yeah, and it didn't happen in the book.
Right, we never actually got to see that actual scene.
That scene wasn't represented in the book, and
it could have been.
Yeah,
and I was kind of annoyed after the dance. I was like, this better be in the book. This better be like, this is unfair for the people that got to go if people that don't get to see this scene. And yes, it gets confirmed, but just like you said, they didn't get that actual scene. So I've got kind of mixed feelings about that.
Yeah,
the ball was amazing, but maybe wrong place for major lore drops.
Yeah, I think that it does kind of speak to something that I feel kind of encroaching as this series gets bigger and bigger and more people start reading it and more worlds are introduced, and it happened with the MCU as well.
And that's literally was about to say the Marvelification of it.
Yeah, it's. I am of the firm opinion that you shouldn't have to read everything else to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I do think there's a threshold beyond which it's like, okay, at this point you can assume everybody knows what you're talking about when you talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like until you've hit that point, you need to be making your stories accessible to the people who are only reading that series. I know people who only read Stormlight and have not read any of the others. I know people who have only read Mistborn, Eras 1 and 2, who haven't read the rest of them. And they are insanely confused when major plot points hinge on them having knowledge about other series.
Yeah. We've talked about it. I almost skipped the interlude chapters because a lot of them were Cosmere connected and they made no sense to me. And at least in Way of Kings, I was so bored.
Oh, yeah. Once
I hit Words of Radiance, it really picked up, but yeah.
Yeah. Most of the interludes in Way of Kings are just cameos from other Cosmere stuff. And it's fine when it's those interludes because the interludes tell the reader that, like, okay, this isn't part of the story you're currently reading. This is something else going on somewhere else.
Right.
But when you start to have major plot points from the books center and resolve themselves around the idea that the audience already has read all of your other work, I feel like there's a point where you're going to start losing people.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've read all the Cosmere. So for me, it was like, oh yeah, like all of these little things. I've read all the Cosmere, and that's that. At the same time, there were times when I was reading the Almighty chapters in that, and it's like, if you don't know about the shattering of Adonalsium, and if you don't know like the Cosmere at large, will this make any sense to you?
Yeah, which he did. I think Hoyd talked a lot about the shattering in this novel.
He did.
So I think he was trying to fill those holes in, but I completely agree. It's such a big and important moment for the Cosmere as a whole.
Yeah. And it didn't like lessen my experience reading the book. I just worry about it lessening the experience for other people who aren't as obsessive about it as I am.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, my other note for Chanarach is I love how much this book was foreshadowing Harold Kaladin. Because the prologue, we see Gavilar wanting to become a herald, and then with the Chanarach chapter where she talked about either killing herself or killing Shallan so that Shallan could become the Herald. The novel was establishing, we need another Herald, it's coming, and so when we actually had that moment with Kaladin, it fit, it made sense.
Yeah, well, and you just actually brought something to light that we should have talked about last time for me, but about like Gavilar's whole entire thing is like finding the right words to say. Like, do I need to find the right combination? It needs to be this like pithy, epic declaration of this, and Kaladin becoming a herald was just him saying, "I'll do it."
Yeah,
you know, you just connected a dot in my, you just connected two dots in my brain of that. Yeah. I think that's really cool that like Gavilar was struggling for so long to find the right kingly things to say to become a herald, and Kaladin just honor is dead, but I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to intent, which we know is incredibly important within the Cosmere and Investiture. Gavilar's intent was he wanted to become a god. He wanted to continually just restart the desolations over and over. There would be no break in between them, just infinite war until he got what he wanted.
Right.
And then Kaladin just wanted to save people. He wanted to save people, and he wanted to save Syl, and I think that intent really is what separated their words.
Yep. The world needed him, and so he said, "I'll do it."
Yeah.
No, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that elevates the whole story for me even further.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Do we think Shallan is pregnant?
I do. I mean, this was the spiciest Sanderson book I've read.
I know. Warbreaker got a little spicy. But...
Yeah. And I mean, I've read like A Wise Man's Fear, like the Kingkiller Chronicles. I've read books where like sexuality is a lot more present in that. Like I've read Game of Thrones, you know, like seeing it in a Stormlight book, like took me aback for a second. Like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And then I think that like it kind of stuck out, but then we get that final scene with her where, you know, she caresses her belly and
living not just for herself. Like, I need to survive, not just for me. Yeah. No, and I think she is. It all
clicked.
I think she is. It's going to be fun. I think that there's going to be a lot once the Spren return. There's going to be a lot of different factions of Spren vying for that kid.
Yeah.
Because Shallan was sought out by the Cryptics. And, you know, we already see, kids of heralds are of special attention to the Spren. Especially moving forward where the status quo is completely changed. I think there's a lot of different factions that are going to take an interest in this grandchild of both the Blackthorn and a herald. There's going to be some pretty big things coming for that kid.
Which, timeline-wise, the kid will probably be about 10 to 15.
Right. Perfect young adult protagonist age.
Yeah. So last episode, one of my very last notes is how heartbroken I was that Adolin and Shallan had been separated. And, of course, I love Adolin and Shallan, and I want the best for them, but... a big reason I said that was because of this potential child. Is this child going to have to grow up without their father?
Yeah. These poor Kholin kids.
Right?
And their fathers.
Yeah. Will we maybe see some parallels between Adolin and his child, right? Because Adolin and Renarin both struggled with their dad being gone, fighting in wars, and... now, how is Adolin going to handle that when he's the one that wasn't there? Yeah. Which, it's not Adolin's fault. It's not his fault, but still.
Adolin doesn't even know.
Right.
He has no way of knowing that he even has a child.
Which, she connected to him with a Sion, right? I know she was at least trying, but I can't remember if she was successful in the novel.
I don't think Seons were working to Azir. I'm not sure. I don't remember that happening. I could be completely wrong. Like I said, I read this book in a week and haven't touched it since.
Right. Because Thydakar, our boy Kelsier, she asked if she could borrow the Sion. And then I know she tries to connect with Adolin through it. I just can't remember if it actually happened or not. Or if she was successful.
Yeah. I'd have to reread that.
So... listen, in my heart of hearts, I just want the next novel to start with, and Shallan went on a 2-month journey and found her way home, and they lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
However, I know that's not going to happen.
I am hoping that the isolation between all the main characters is something that gets resolved in the first book of the next arc. Because I don't want to see a massive, like, 5-book thing of just Shallan and Adolin desperately trying to get back to each other. Like, I'm hoping the Heralds return in this first book. Like, like, what I don't want is nobody knows where Kaladin is, and he has no presence in this story until the very last book when he shows up with all the Heralds and they beat Retribution. You know, like, I don't want that. I want them to come back in book 6. Kaladin has now spent the last 70 years doing therapy with all the Heralds, and they're more equipped to fight. It's still going to be a fight, but they're not just going to show up at the end to save the day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think I'm in the same boat. I'd be pretty disappointed if they were ex machina, the Heralds just showing up.
Yeah.
They need to play a larger role.
Yeah.
I'm also a Kaladin and Shanarat shipper. I'm not ashamed.
Oh!
He missed his redhead, so he shot for her mom.
Shallan's mom has got it going on.
One of my favorite memes is that scene from The Office where Michael's telling Pam that...
Who, Michael?
Yeah.
Who is it, Michael?
Who, Kaladin? Who is it?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Anyway, yes, I really want to see Shallan and Adolin back together as soon as possible.
Yeah. We already know because of the time skip and the time dilation stuff that's going on. Like, we already know for them it's going to be longer than it is for us. I don't need books and books of how long it's been.
Yeah, for sure. My theory is, and I don't think it's that crazy, that the flashbacks scenes for the next 5 books are going to be the in-between years between books 5 and 6.
That would be smart. That would make a lot of sense. That we pick up in that
just
same
to
15
catch the audience up.
Yeah, we come back in that same 15-year time skip and start from there going forward, but then the flashbacks kind of tell what happened in the interim.
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really good.
One of my favorite things about Shallan's story is I think it was kind of teased in Rhythm of War that the Lightweavers weren't one united group like the Windrunners were. Shallan had her own group. I think they were called the Court of Midnight. And if other Lightweavers popped up and had their own group, cool.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really interesting concept. We didn't really get to see it play out much in this novel, but I think it's going to be more important. I think that the next 5 books are going to feature different Lightweaver groups or sects, and are they on the same side? Are they working for different people? How do they interact? I think, we'll continue to see that espionage aspect to the series. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think with Mistborn taking its espionage turn going into Era 3, I think that's more likely that, a lot of the big epic fantasy, like medieval style battles in Stormlight are kind of behind us, and we might get some more, going forward, but the Lord of the Rings style, army in front of the Black Gate and the Siege of Helm's Deep type stuff might be kind of in the first half, and going forward we're going to see a lot more modernization of like how warfare is handled.
Right, which I actually think Dalinar had some really interesting dialogue about this in one of the novels about what does warfare look like once the Knights Radiance return.
Yeah.
They kind of make traditional warfare unneeded. If you can have a, Windrunner fly over, and just drop rocks on armies or swoop down and break their ranks and fly away.
Right.
And then we actually got to see a little bit of that.
Yeah. I mean, just like air travel revolutionized warfare for us to a degree that before there was, like, as long as you knew where the enemy was and you had your shields facing them, you were pretty good. And now, there's so much more behind that. And if you add in a bunch of magical wizards who can make people float into the air or become your best friend.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of things that traditional rank and file marching isn't going to be able to handle.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I can't believe I have to say this, but looking at what we've talked about in the first part and this part, this may end up being a 3-part.
I think it's going to have to
series.
Be.
Sorry,
we
audience,
have not even talked about the biggest events in this book yet.
I know. So I've got for sure one more thing I think we can talk about. But before we move on, is there anything else about Shallan or in her story that you would like to talk about?
No, I don't have any issues with Shallan in this book. I feel like in this book specifically, she was in a kind of a similar place as Kaladin in this book, where she's still a viewpoint character. She's still doing important things, but her arc kind of wrapped up in the last book.
Yeah.
So, but like, she's not gone. We're gonna see more of her. Mm-hmm. You know, I other than the fact that I wish that the reveal of her parentage had been handled a little more deftly.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really have any complaints about Shallan. She had some really cool fight scenes. She had some really cool light weaving applications.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing with the swapped knives was pretty cool, where she didn't actually cast a light weaving on the knife to make it look like it was swapped, but she made it look like she had cast a knife weaving. It was like a double bluff, and outsmarted Mraize that way. Like, I liked that. I loved that. One of my favorite things in the Cosmere ever since the first Mistborn book is using your opponent's anticipation of the magic.
Yeah.
To get the better of them. It's what Vin did with Sean Alariel.
Right.
Assassinating Ellen, where they were in an ATM battle and Vin shut off her ATM before it ran out, and it made Sean think that it had run out, and then Vin used it to basically flashbang her right at the end. Like one of my favorite things in the Cosmere generally is your opponents are so reliant on their magic system that they don't think to account for the fact that normal people are dangerous in general.
Still. Yeah, I agree.
So I loved that whole like knife swap, the subterfuge of that going on.
I think my last point for Shallan is I really loved that she was able to defeat essentially the Ghostblood sect here on Roshar, but successfully make a truce with Kelsier.
That was interesting.
Yeah, reading it, I was like, okay, obviously Kelsier's going to come back with a vengeance and be a major villain for Arc 2 because his friends or his, people were killed here. But for her to actually make peace,
and they're like helping each other.
Really interesting way to handle it. Yeah.
She's he's giving her reports about like the time dilation stuff going on around Roshar.
Right.
And
we talked about last episode Brandon having his cake and eating it too, and it's kind of the similar situation here where she killed the Ghostbloods here but made peace with the Ghostbloods here.
Yeah,
but I actually think it worked out really well.
Well, I think it worked out here because it implied that there was more going on with Kelsier. It wasn't just there wasn't just like a dichotomy of it's either this or that and you tried to do both. It's more of like, okay, so there's more going on with Kelsier that we don't know about that we're going to find out about. Like, there must be a reason he's willing to work with Shallan now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I think the last thing that we should talk about before we end this episode is, because it connects so heavily to Ghostbloods in general, the time dilation. And the fact that sneaky Brandon Sanderson established that Roshar would return to standard time flow with the rest of the Cosmere right about the same time that Era 3 takes place.
Yeah, that's you saying that was about my reaction to it. You sneaky Sanderson. Because up until this point we were thinking like, okay, so if Era 2 happens like right in between the two arcs of Stormlight, so Ghostbloods must happen way after Stormlight finishes. How are they gonna, like, how are we gonna do that, if Stormlight is like the main story in the Cosmere alongside Mistborn, how are we going to handle the fact that Mistborn spans so much further in the timeline than Stormlight does? And then it's like, oh yeah, you'll experience about 10 15 years. Everywhere else will experience 70. And it's like, oh, well, that's easy, isn't it? But it's not cheap. You know, like I don't see it being as like a easy way out ex machina type of thing. I see it more of like, oh, that was a clever way to make it so that Mistborn Era 2 and Stormlight back half will like kind of coincide with each other.
Yeah, and that makes me really excited for just the future of the Cosmere as a whole. These two stories, Ghostbloods and Stormlight books 6 through 5, taking place relatively at the same time, has to matter.
It does.
I don't think Brandon... Yeah, he wouldn't have just made... He could have had the time dilation go on for 1,000 years, or 150, or 3.
Right.
But the fact that it connects here, it has to matter.
It's very significant that was the rate at which time was sped up for Roshar. That it, like, you know... Like, the fact that we now have these characters coexisting with whoever the main characters are of the next series means something.
Yeah. So, we'll just have to see how that plays out. And, audience, again, I'm sorry. I thought this was going to be a one and done podcast episode, and we're turning it into a series. But we'll see you guys next week. Well, before we get out of here, though, I know I gave you an opportunity last week, but hey, maybe somebody didn't listen to last week's episode for some reason. Where can people find you if they want to check you out?
I'm Setherton on YouTube. I'm currently doing a series with Geronimo. We're playing a game called Halo. And
you probably haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's a little game, you know.
Yeah,
definitely wasn't the flagship title that shipped with the original Xbox or anything.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we're playing through all the games chronologically, and we actually today just finished recording the very first Halo Combat Evolved game. So we're going to be doing Halo 2 next. I will say that we have decided to go on a hiatus. Curran is having a kid, and so we're going to let him not have to worry about scheduling recording sessions for a couple months in this interim. I have several series planned that I won't confirm as of yet. So there will be still content coming out regularly on my channel. He's still going to be doing a lot of his own solo stuff. It's just that one series that we're doing together is going to be put on hiatus.
Yeah. I know it's going on hiatus, but you have what, like close to 20 episodes, though, for people to still check out?
18 to 20 currently uploaded. I'm actually, Curran, I don't think will listen to this podcast, so I'll tell you this, but I'm going to surprise him on the episode where we officially surpass the watch time of all 9 Star Wars movies.
Hell yeah.
Curran, together we have made more content than Star Wars.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, audience, same thing as last week. Go check out Seth. There'll be a link in the description if you want to go check out his channel. And thanks again for listening. I'll see you in the next one.
See you guys. Thanks for listening.